We're going to start in a minute or two. Hare Krishna. I don't know if you can see me.
We can probably.
Can you see me?
Yeah.
You didn't wait. In the volume up all the way?
Yeah. Here you are.
Huh?
You can start.
No, they're waiting. She's going to tell me. I wish I had a paper book to read from instead of this tablet.
So we are very grateful to you, Prabhuji, for blessing us. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Muktavandya prabhu. Krishna. Kalpatruvischa Kripasindavi Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Let us
Vijaya.
welcome Prabhu. My Lord, we chant it 3 times.
Hare Bol. Hare Bol.
Haribo. Haribo.
Yes, Prabhuji, we can start now.
All right. I'm reading something from the second volume of the Prabhupada Lilamrita. The chapter is, the book is called Planting the Seed. So this is Prabhupada in his first year in the United States, and then starting the movement in New York City. And yeah, so up until this point, I'm starting reading from when Prabhupada first moved into the first temple at 26 Second Avenue, New York City. And but up until then, he had been more or less wandering around New York. He had a place to stay with Indian yogi, Dr. Mishra, who had his own little following uptown in New York City. But Prabhupada wanted to preach more. Dr. Mishra wouldn't let Prabhupada preach to his students because Dr. Mishra was an impersonalist, and Prabhupada was telling them to surrender to Krishna. And so Dr. Mishra, he admired Prabhupada and he had great respect for him, but he didn't want him to preach to his followers. And after being there for a few months, Prabhupada wanted to move to a place where he'd be free to preach. So he moved through meeting some friends here and there. He moved downtown to the southern tip of Manhattan, the main part of New York City, and he was staying in the apartments of a couple of different young people there and holding classes. And he attracted already a following there. People coming to the apartments to hear him lecture and join him in chanting Hare Krishna. A lot of them were musicians, and they just like to chant with Prabhupada and play their instruments but some of them became a little serious about Krishna consciousness, but not so much really, except for one one of the early men from back then. His name was Michael Grant, and he stayed with Prabhupada after Prabhupada left these apartments. And Michael Grant, who was initiated as Mukunda, uh, and Prabhupada had him marry his girlfriend at the time, and Janaki. Prabhupada the boyfriends and girlfriends were living together. And but Prabhupada said that they shouldn't live as boyfriend and girlfriend, they should get married. So Prabhupada would marry them and together and give them initiation also. So that Michael Grant became Mukunda, and he's still active in ISKCON, Mukunda Goswami, Mukunda Maharaj. I don't know if anyone has ever seen him, but he's must be in his over 80 years old now, and he's still with us and serving in Prabhupada's mission. But it was a time in the 60s, this is 1966 now, when Prabhupada came, and it was hippie times. People have heard of the hippies. You've probably heard of hippies, but it was like just young people who were like questioning things. And of course, there was a lot of drug taking and illicit sex involved, but a lot of them were also very thoughtful and philosophical, examining what life was about, what the purpose of life was meant to be. So, and the place in New York City that Prabhupada was living now was like a center of the hippie culture in the United States. One of the main centers was in New York City and in San Francisco, but the hippie culture was all over the United States and Europe, of course, and it was a very good time for bringing Krishna consciousness to the United States, because people, young men and women, were searching what's the meaning of life, and hardly anyone had been to India. Some people had, but it wasn't a very common thing back then. And hardly anybody in the United States knew anything about India or the actual spiritual culture, the Vedic culture, which is still present in India at the time and now. But people had heard about Vishnu and Shiva and mantras and meditation and the merging with the one and becoming one with God. There were all these phrases and little bits of almost mistaken impressions of uh, Indian or Hindu philosophy floating around in the United States, but there wasn't anything like Prabhupada presented in the Bhagavad Gita as it is, strictly according to exactly what Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, had given directly in his own words. So, but people knew a little of this, a little of that. A lot of people were doing some hatha yoga and stuff, but it was all mixed up with like LSD and marijuana, and people getting high on all those uh, mind expanding drugs, and the only and so people were ripe for hearing from um, anyone who presented themselves, pretty much any yogi or swami who came from India and looked the part, looked like they're authentic spiritual person. Anyone could be easily fooled by them, but it was all some impersonal thing or just some confused, mixed up conglomeration of this idea and that idea. And so, and there were sannyasis and yogis coming from India, incarnations, self-proclaimed incarnations of God. They were coming, and people were listening to them. And but when Prabhupada came, so anyway, Prabhupada started preaching, and people were ripe for hearing from about what they took to be Indian culture, Indian philosophy. And so when they met Prabhupada, they could listen. And of course, Prabhupada's presence as Krishna's pure representatives was so much more powerful than any of these bogus yogis or sannyasis that were all over the place. Not all over the place, but they were here. But when Prabhupada came and started preaching, then people, some sincere young men and women, mostly young men and women, came to Prabhupada and started taking him very seriously, especially when they got the first temple. There's a small storefront in Lower Manhattan, 26 Second Avenue. If you come to the United States or if you've been here, you know that it's just a very small place. It's probably not more than like maybe 15 or 20 feet by 30 or 40 feet long, and probably a little less than that. It's not big, but that was with the place where Mukunda Prabhu and Michael Grant and some of the other early followers of Prabhupada rented for Prabhupada. And the rent was only was very inexpensive. But everybody there was poor also, so nobody had much money. But anyway, they rented this storefront for him, and then they also rented an apartment in the next building, upstairs in the next building. That's where Prabhupada lived, and he held the meetings uh, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday night, 7 to 9 p.m. in this storefront building, 26 Second Avenue. But I'll just read a little bit from the lilamrita about this very beginning. There was a lot that led up to this, but this is the very beginning, the first actual temple. And you would say, "Well, temple? What's that? A temple? It's just a little room on a street in Manhattan." But because Prabhupada was there, and as Krishna's representative, wherever Krishna's representative is automatically a temple. It's automatically a holy place, and so it was the first ISKCON temple, and we still own that building to the present day, and it's still a place of pilgrimage for all the ISKCON devotees who live in New York or visit New York. Generally, everyone wants to at least visit 26 Second Avenue, and I definitely recommend it if you do happen to find yourself in the United States sometimes, but you should definitely visit there. But this is I'm just going to read some of it from the lilamrita and comment on it a little bit. The word spread, although it wasn't so easy now for some of the young people that Prabhupada knew from the Bowery and Chinatown to come. They had other things to do. But when they heard about Swami's new place, they started to drop by. James Green and Bill Epstein had not forgotten the Swami, and they wanted to come. The Paradox Restaurant, that was like a hippie restaurant where people used to hang out and drink tea and meet and talk during the day. It's called the Paradox, and that was a center where people got to know about Swamiji. Nobody called Prabhupada yet. Everyone referred to him as Swamiji. The Paradox Restaurant was still a live connection and brought new interested people. And others like Stephen Gorino, that's the name of Satsvarup Maharaj, the author of the Lilamrita. His name that he was given at birth was Stephen Gorino. And so he mentions himself. And others, like Stephen Gorino, saw the Swami's sign in the window. Steve, age 26, was a caseworker for the city's welfare department. And one day on his lunch break, as he was walking home from the welfare office, he saw the Swami's sign taped to the window. He had been reading a paperback Bhagavad Gita. There were definitely translations of Bhagavad Gita out there, and people were reading them, and some like Upanishads and Mahabharata translations, nothing very authoritative at all, but the books were out there. So before he met Prabhupada, Stephen Gorino, he had been reading a paperback Bhagavad Gita, and he promised himself he would attend the Swami's class. That day, as he stood with the Swami before the storefront, Howard, that's another of the early devotees, Hayagriva Prabhu, who was instrumental in getting and developing the New Vrindavan farm in the very beginning. Howard had also noticed the little sign in the window. Lectures in Bhagavad Gita, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Okay, this is a narration of a typical meeting in the summer of 1966. Is the very, very beginning of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And those who weren't in the United States or anywhere in the world outside of India before 1965, which is probably everybody on this Zoom call except for me, but I was here. And I can tell you from my own experience that there was no such thing as Krishna consciousness anywhere in the world. There were no ISKCON temples, there were no Bhagavad Gita as it is, no Srimad Bhagavatam authorized by translation by Prabhupada. There was no Chaitanya Charitamrita. There was nothing, just some very confused ideas of so-called Indian philosophy, or so-called. So it just didn't exist. Now you go anywhere in the world, and if you're less than 70 years old, you don't know that it just didn't exist. It's like the whole material world planet was a desert. You walk out in the desert, you won't find any water. So there was no Krishna consciousness. It's something that I remind people about because everybody nowadays is used to it. There are temples, there's devotees everywhere, there's Bhagavad Gita everywhere, as it is everywhere, but it wasn't like that before Prabhupada left India and came to the United States. It was a completely different world back then. I'll read from a recount. Satsrup Maharaj gives a recounting of a meeting Monday, Wednesday, or Friday in the storefront. The summer evening was warm, and in the storefront, the back windows and front door were opened wide. Young men, several of them dressed in black jeans and button-down sports shirts, had left their worn sneakers by the front door and were now sitting on the floor. Most of them were from the Lower East Side. No one had had to go to great trouble to come here. The little room was barren, no pictures, no furniture, no rug, not even a chair, only a few plain straw mats. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling into the center of the room. It was 7 o'clock, and about a dozen people had gathered when the Swami suddenly opened the side door and entered the room. He wasn't wearing a shirt, and the saffron cloth that draped his torso left his arms and some of his chest bare. His complexion was smooth golden brown, and as they watched him, his head shaven, his ears long lobed, and his aspect grave, he seemed like pictures they'd seen of the Buddha in meditation. He was old, yet erect in his posture, fresh and radiant. His forehead was decorated with the yellowish clay markings of the Vaishnavas. Prabhupada recognized Howard and smiled. "You have brought your friends?" And Howard had. There were two other early devotees that they all lived together in an apartment, Kirtanananda and now I can't think of his name, but they all lived in the same apartment, and they all started coming to Swamiji at the same time at the very beginning. And so they all came, and there were several others there. Prabhupada stepped out of his white shoes, sat down on a thin mat, faced his congregation, and indicated they could all be seated. He distributed several pairs of brass kartals and briefly demonstrated the rhythm, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. He began playing a startling, ringing sound. He began singing, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now it was the audience's turn. Chant, he told them. Some already knew. Gradually the others caught on, and after a few rounds, all were chanting together. Most of these young men and the few young women present had at one time or another embarked on a psychedelic voyage in search of a new world of expanded consciousness. Boldly and recklessly, they had entered the turbulent, forbidden waters of LSD and psychedelic mushrooms. Heedless of warnings, they had risked everything and done it. Yet there was merit in their valor, their eagerness to find the extra dimensions of the self, to get beyond ordinary existence, even if they didn't know what was beyond was, or whether they would ever return to the comfort of the ordinary. Nonetheless, whatever truth they had found, they remained unfulfilled, and whatever worlds they had reached, these young psychedelic voyagers had always returned to the Lower East Side. Now they were sampling the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Yeah, so people were definitely seeking. And when Prabhupada came into the room, it was obvious just for first seeing Prabhupada, that here was the real authentic thing, the real deal. And it just, Prabhupada's presence is so strong. And of course, now we have many, many great souls all throughout ISKCON. And when you're in their presence, it's very clear that they're on on a different level than the average person, even the average devotee. So all the devotees are great souls, but there are many among us, many, many great souls among us who are extremely advanced and extremely pure in their dedication to and their realization of Prabhupada's mission and Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, and their understanding or realization of Radharani and Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. But at this time, there was nobody but Prabhupada. There was Prabhupada and Swamiji and everybody else. And let's see, I'm just going to read a little more. Exotic it was, yet anyone could see that a Swami was raising an ancient prayer in praise of God. This wasn't rock and roll or jazz. He was a holy man, a Swami, making a public religious demonstration. But the combination was strange. An old Indian Swami chanting an ancient mantra with a storefront full of young American hippies singing along. Prabhupada sang on, his shaven head held high and tilted, his body trembling slightly with emotion. Confidently, he led the mantra, absorbed in pure devotion. And they responded. More passers-by were drawn to the front window and open door. Some jeered, made fun of them. But the chanting was too strong. Within the sound of the kirtan, even the car horns were a faint echo. The vibration of auto engines and the rumble of trucks continued, but in the distance now, unnoticed. Gathered under the dim electric light in the bare room, the group chanted after their leader, growing gradually from a feeble, hesitant chorus to an approximate harmony of voices. They continued chanting and clapping, putting into it whatever they could in hopes of discovering its secrets. This Swami was not simply giving some 5-minute sample demonstration. For the moment, he was their leader, their guide in an unknown realm. Howard and Keith's little encounter with a kirtan in Calcutta had left them outsiders. The chanting had never before come like this, right in the middle of the Lower East Side, with a genuine Swami leading them. Everyone knew in the beginning, it was obvious, the Prabhupada Swamiji is from India. It was pretty clear. But even from the beginning, it became easy to understand from the very beginning that this is the chanting or the Bhagavad Gita as it is, the philosophy. It's not Indian philosophy. It's not Hindu philosophy. It's prevalent in India because that's the land of Krishna, but it's not Indian philosophy or Indian mantras. It's transcendental. And the earliest of the devotees could understand that, because we are in essence, each one of us, we're transcendental people. We're not residents of America or India or Africa or South America. We're not residents of this planet. We're residents of the spiritual world. But in our forgetful condition, we think of ourselves in terms of the body and the country that we're born into and all the people that we know. But it was clear from the very beginning that this is the Swamiji was a transcendental person, not like anybody else anybody had ever met. And it was the most fortunate thing. The traditional Vedic culture is that the person, aspirant spiritualist, is supposed to search for their spiritual master, and people were looking for swamis, gurus, but nobody knew what a real guru is. Nobody knew what a real swami is. But Krishna just dropped Swami Prabhupada right down in the middle of all this ignorance of the material world of the United States, of New York. Just dropped Prabhupada right down into the middle of everything. And suddenly he was there, face to face, with all these young people who had no idea what they were getting into. No idea that same for me when I first met the devotees, and I liked it right away. I knew that it was the kirtan was something very significant, something that I had never experienced anything like before, but I had no idea the change it would make in every single aspect of my life. And we're all the same way. All the early devotees were exactly like that. All the devotees who are accustomed to identifying with the body in the material world. When we first begin to take Bhagavad Gita as it is very seriously, then it's not long before we discover uh, that Krishna is so real, he's God. I'm experiencing his presence face to face or through his sound vibration in my ear. And I'll speak about myself. I had no idea of the demands it would place upon me to change everything that I'd ever known about how I thought, what I should do, what I shouldn't do, what was the meaning of life. I had no idea what the meaning of life is. But Krishna is so powerful and so strong, and Swamiji, as his representative, was so powerful and strong in his presentation of Krishna consciousness that those who had any inclination at all for spiritual life, they could immediately understand that here is something that I really have to take this seriously. It became obvious very quickly, and many devotees did. Many of them did. Many of these earliest of the followers, Brahmananda Prabhu, Satsvarup Maharaj, and Kirtananda, and Hayagriva, and several others from the very beginning, Mother Jadharani, who's still very active and still painting pictures of Krishna. So she was the first woman in ISKCON, the first full-time woman devotee. There were others, of course, before her, but she's the first active disciple of Prabhupada. But as soon as they met Prabhupada, they could understand. The same thing that I understand, the same thing that you all understood as soon as you began to associate with the devotees, that this is something that we have to take as the most serious thing, ultimately as the only thing that matters. We do all kinds of other things in the material world, but at the root of everything, there's, especially when you come close to the end of life, end of your time in this material body, you see that there really is nothing left. You may still have some family members around you, but whatever money you made is all gone or useless to you. Your health is all gone. Everything is all gone. And so whether it's now in your youth and aspiring, and you will do so many things, but ultimately everything has to be centered around our service, our dedication to Krishna, to our spiritual master, to going home back to Godhead where we belong. We don't belong. We don't belong here. I'll read just a little bit more. Let's see. So this is Prabhupada giving a lecture, and his lecture is very basic, and yet for restless youth, heavily philosophical. Some can't take it, and they rise rudely upon hearing the Swami's first words. They put on their shoes at the front door and return to the street. Others had left as soon as they saw the singing was over. Still, this is his best group yet. It's another hot and noisy July evening outside his door. Children are on summer vacation and they stay out on the street until dark. Nearby, a big dog is barking. The traffic creates constant rumbling. Just outside the window, little girls are shrieking, and all this makes lecturing difficult. Yet despite the distraction of the children, traffic, and dogs, he wants the door open. If it is closed, he says, why is it closed? People may come in. He continues, undaunted, quoting Sanskrit, holding his audience, and developing his urgent message, while the relentless cacophony rivals his every word. And yeah, so one point is that, yeah, you see, from the very beginning, although Satsarup Maharaj points out here that his lecture is very basic, basic Krishna conscious philosophy, and yet, yeah, very basic, but he's quoting all the Sanskrit verses, as you know, and you listen to any of Prabhupada's lectures or read his purports, he's constantly quoting Sanskrit verses and Bengali verses from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and but he's presenting Krishna consciousness in the most basic way. This is the first time any of them have ever heard anything like this. But it's not that because it's basic, it's not it's like Prabhupada is leaving anything out. It's just that one characteristic of a very expert instructor in any subject is that they can present even very complex, advanced topics, say in science or in any kind of discipline. They can present it in a simple way that, while it doesn't leave anything important out, it is understandable to people who don't have any experience with it. That was Parth calling. But, Yeah, so, and Prabhupada is the most expert preacher, the most expert teacher. He was so attuned, so expert in his subject, he was fully conversant and fully realized in all the Vedic Shastras. And he, by any estimation, Prabhupada's just raw intelligence is so uh, unfathomably great by anybody, any kind of estimation, IQ test, or however you want to. And so Prabhupada, he's the most expert teacher, and he's the most intelligent person, and he's the most able to present for a newcomer, especially the very difficult science of Krishna consciousness in a way that was easily comprehensible by the ordinary people in wherever he went. In this case, in the hippies in New York City. That in itself is a great miracle, and it's the reality of how Prabhupada preached throughout his time on this planet from 1965 to 1977 when he left. It was a characteristic of his that no matter what audience he was speaking to, whether it's a group of scholarly college professors or some government officials or wherever he was speaking, he was able to very intelligently, intuitively adjust his preaching to that audience. And one thing I definitely want to recommend, and I do it pretty much almost every time I talk, is that everyone should, of course, listen to Prabhupada's audio lectures, bhajans and kirtans, especially his lectures. I would say especially his lectures, but and especially try to sometimes at least listen to some of Prabhupada's lectures that he was giving in the summer, fall, and winter of 1966 in New York City. As you can hear in his voice how, because he hadn't attracted a big following yet. There wasn't a big movement with a lot of temples yet. He was still didn't know how ISKCON would develop. And so you can hear in his voice the urgency in his voice, how he was just really emphasizing every word, every philosophical concept, and trying, you can just hear it in his voice, how is so determined to try to make people understand this most important science of the soul and our relationship to Krishna. So I recommend that you listen to that. And towards the end, Prabhupada was in New York City until the beginning of January in 1967. So from the summer of 1966 to January of 1967, it's only several months. And his disciples there, they were like kind of shocked when Shamasundar Mukunda had moved to with his wife. They had gone to San Francisco, and they were planning to go on to India, but Prabhupada asked them to stay in San Francisco and start a temple there. So they did. They stayed there and they started a temple, and the second temple in San Francisco. But when Prabhupada decided to leave New York City, his disciples had been with him every day, like all day, not all day, but they were with him a lot during every day and for several months. And when he said he was going to San Francisco, they were like shocked. It's like, what? How could you leave? How could you leave us? And they were thinking that this is what Krishna consciousness is. We'll always be here. Swamiji will always be here with us in New York, in hippie land in New York City, and we'll always go out chanting on the street and in the parks, and Swamiji will always be with us. So they were kind of shocked when Prabhupada left. But of course, Prabhupada had much bigger ideas. His idea was which he accomplished, was to spread Krishna consciousness everywhere, all over the world, all over the universe. And he did that. And he did that. But it all began here in New York City at 26 Second Avenue. And all right, so uh, I can go on more, but does anyone have anything to say? Any questions or comments on anything? The early days of ISKCON are, everyone should read about them and hear about them. All the early disciples, or many have left already, and many more are always leaving. So try to learn from them whenever you have the chance, hear from them. And of course, so many have written books now. The lilamrita is there, and many other disciples of Prabhupada have written books about their time that they spent with Prabhupada, and have given lectures and seminars. So take advantage of these things and hear about the early days. Read about them. All right. Anything else? Oh, the Devahuti Mukunda Lila. Oh, yeah, I don't. Oh, okay. Your microphone's on now.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. Prabhuji. You can go on for another 5 minutes if you want.
Okay. I didn't really prepare very well today, but
It's going very well, Prabhu.
I'll read a little more.
Or
Okay.
you want to share something related to your beginning in Krishna consciousness?
I'll just read a little more. I have some more here. He is still stressing the same point. Whatever you do in Krishna consciousness, however little it may be, is eternally good for you. Yet now, more than uptown or on the Bowery, he is calling his hearers to take to Krishna consciousness fully and become devotees. He assures them, this is quote from Prabhupada at this time from a lecture. Anyone can become a devotee and friend of Krishna like Arjuna. Yeah, and that became obvious in New York City in 1966. We were all just wandering very aimlessly, no religious principles at all, hardly at all, and a very degraded lifestyle. Everyone is very sinful, and but so many great devotees came out of the United States, come out of South America, Africa, all over the world. So the fact of the matter is, anyone can become a devotee and friend of Krishna like Arjuna. You will be surprised that Lord Chaitanya's principal disciples were also called fallen in society. He appointed Haridas Thakur to the highest position in his spiritual mission, although he happened to take birth in a Mohammedan family. So there is no bar for anyone. Everyone can become spiritual master, provided he knows the science of Krishna. This is the science of Krishna, this Bhagavad Gita. And if anyone knows it perfectly, then he becomes a spiritual master. And Prabhupada wanted us all to take Krishna consciousness so seriously that we could all become spiritual master. I read one thing from a letter, I forget what it was, a letter or a converse. I think it was a letter to one of his disciples. It was in somewhere around 1970, or maybe a little earlier or a little later, 71 or 72, I think. But there was one thing he said in that letter. He said, I want all my disciples to become spiritual master. And he said that probably by 1975, all my disciples will have disciples of their own. Of course, that didn't happen, but the point is, but all of his disciples became spiritual masters in the sense of distributing books and getting other people to chant Hare Krishna. And Vatma Pradarshika Guru is a type of guru. Or if somebody comes to the temple and he gets instructions from you or from any of you young people there, from Mother Devahuti, definitely, and Mukunda Lila, they're great devotees. And all the disciples, all the sincere followers of Prabhupada and his disciples become spiritual master, at least in that respect, that they also become qualified. If you have faith in Krishna, faith in Prabhupada, faith in Lord Chaitanya, faith in Lord Krishna, that is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, if you have that simple faith and dedication to Krishna, then you're qualified to give Krishna to other people. If you give one of Prabhupada's books to somebody, you're acting as a spiritual master. Anyway, we don't have to use that terminology. But Prabhupada wanted his disciples to become spiritual masters. That's how the Guru Parampara system goes on and on and on. Let me read just a little more. He happened to take birth in a Mohammedan family, so there's no bar for anyone. And this transcendental vibration, Hare Krishna, will help us by cleansing the dust from the mirror of our mind. On the mind, we have accumulated material dust, just like on Second Avenue, due to the constant traffic of motor cars, there's always a creation of dust over everything. And it's like that in New York City or any big city. I know New York City is like, if you take a shower and you put on all clean clothes, but you go out in the morning and you're out or going around New York City all day, you come back in the afternoon or the evening and you're dirty. You just feel dirty and you are dirty. So that's what it is being in the material world, whether you're in a tropical paradise or in the Himalayan mountains or in the streets of Calcutta or New York City. The material world is a very dirty place. It's materially dirty. And so Krishna consciousness, the Maha Mantra will cleanse us from that. Similarly, by our manipulation of materialistic activities, there are some material dusts which are accumulated on the mind, and therefore we are unable to see things in true perspective. So this process, the vibration of the transcendental sound, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra will cleanse the dust. And as soon as the dust is cleared, then as you see your nice face in the mirror, similarly, you can see your real constitutional position as spirit soul. Okay, I guess I'll stop there. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. This is so inspiring to hear from you. So let us thank Hg Muktavandya Prabhu for inspiring us and agreeing to bless us so profusely by taking us nearer to Srila Prabhupada and all his glorious associates. Let us thank Hg Muktavandya Prabhu after chanting 3 times.
Hari Bol! Hari Bol!
Haribo, Haribo.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. You made us enter 26nd Avenue and shared us about the early glorious dedicated disciples of Prabhupada and how Prabhupada was sharing that this is urgency. Don't rot in the
Yeah,
material. Take up Krishna
yeah.
consciousness.
Yeah, you can really just hear it in his voice, just how much he wants everyone to understand what he's saying. I have something really important to tell you. Try to understand it. Yeah. Okay.
Surely Prabhu will go through those lectures of Srila Prabhupada in early 1966. And
Yeah.
next we'll see you, Prabhu. And what else? Yes, His Grace Pyari Mohan Prabhu and Her Grace Jivan Oshadhi Mataji. So we'll try to tune in with them, or you can request them. But
Yeah, definitely. I tell him everyone. I'll see him on Thursday. I'll tell him again and make sure. Well, he'll probably want you to call him or something.
yeah, I'll call.
Oh,
Yeah.
but he doesn't use WhatsApp. He
Maybe I'll call
doesn't.
Jivan Oshadhi Mataji's number. She has WhatsApp.
Yeah, call her.
I
Call
texted her.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll send a message again. You can share my number once more to her so that she can save.
Yeah.
Sorry. Jagat Guru Shri Prabhupada ki jai. The Prabhu ki jai. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Hare Krishna Mukunda Lila.
See you next week, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Okay, Hari Bol, Samayra, Bharti, Satvika, Parmeshwara, Adhika Matri, Jaya, Nitika. Thank you so much. Huh? Hope you got spiritually charged. Huh? This is rare opportunity. Huh? Directly listening Srila Prabhupada disciple and Srila Prabhupada disciple sharing that early 1906. है ना? Sometime while practicing bhakti, we take it so casually कि हाँ ठीक है Hare Krishna है Prabhupada है. But we don't understand कि कितने great struggle और urgency से कैसे Prabhupada जी ने ISKCON को establish किया है ना? So the understanding of Srila Prabhupada early disciples is this only कि Prabhupada is not from India, he is from the spiritual world who came to save us, to share us with us Bhagavad Gita as it is and Hare Krishna Mahamantra. That's why by hearing Prabhupada lilamrita, by hearing about Prabhupada, by listening Prabhupada, we develop that eternal relationship with Prabhupada. That's why hearing Srila Prabhupada lecture is so essential, so essential. Huh? So I'll share that early 96 lecture because that we can find from the Veda base. So, Acha, I hope like I'm feeling grateful, all of you are grateful to His Grace Muktavandya Prabhu. Because once we are liberated from the modes of material nature, we can actually worship Krishna. So Prabhupada gave Prabhuji the name Muktavandya Prabhu. Krishna who is worshipped by the liberated. Now here is the voice Aarti time. So you can chant together. I have to attend Aarti. Huh? And evening we'll have class. So Krishna Naam Bolo Sange Chalo. Huh? So together. we get the enthusiasm. Otherwise, we get slowed down, or we get carried away, or we get distracted. So chant now. Thank you so much. Very grateful to each one of you. Hare Krishna, Hare Paul, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shivani is here offline, so we are attending Guru Puja now. Voice Aarti times are different as per the IIT student schedule. That's why. Hare Krishna, please chant. Hare